never expected his military retirement ceremony to end with a jammed rifle thrown at his feet. The desert wind whipped across the remote training facility in Arizona as Colonel Sarah stood before him, her weathered face betraying nothing of the shock that rippled through the assembled crowd of Marines. The MRAD precision rifle landed with a metallic thud on the dusty ground between them. Stared down at the weapon he knew so intimately, its matte black finish dulled by sand and countless missions. This wasn't how retirement ceremonies typically went. Usually there were speeches about service and sacrifice, presentations of folded flags, and handshakes that marked the end of a career. Instead, found himself looking at a rifle that had failed him during what should have been a routine demonstration. Sarah had been his spotter for 8 years across 3 deployments. She knew every quirk of his shooting style, every breath pattern, every subtle adjustment he made based on wind conditions. When she announced she would be presenting him with a special gift during the ceremony, nobody expected this moment of apparent humiliation. The gathered crowd of fellow snipers, commanding officers, and family members shifted uncomfortably. His wife gripped their teenage daughter's hand as whispers began to spread through the ranks. Some assumed it was an accident, a malfunction that had chosen the worst possible moment to occur. Others wondered if this was some kind of military tradition they hadn't witnessed before. Bent down slowly, his weathered hands wrapping around the familiar stock of the rifle. The MRAD had been his constant companion through countless missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. Every scratch on its surface told a story, every modification had been carefully considered and implemented. As he lifted the weapon, he felt its familiar weight and balance, but something was different. The bolt mechanism felt unusually heavy, and there was a subtle rattle that hadn't been there before. Had handled thousands of rifles in his 22-year career, and he could diagnose most mechanical issues by touch alone. This wasn't a standard malfunction. Someone had deliberately modified this weapon. Colonel stepped closer, her boots crunching on the gravel. Her voice carried across the silent formation as she spoke words that would change everything thought he knew about his service record. "Sergeant," she began, using his former rank with deliberate formality, "that rifle contains something that belongs to you. Something you've never seen, but something you've earned through dedication that few will ever understand." Looked up from the rifle, meeting Sarah's steady gaze. In her eyes, he saw something he had rarely witnessed during their years of partnership, pride mixed with what looked almost like reverence. The same woman who had crawled through mud and blood alongside him, who had called in danger-close artillery strikes while he took impossible shots, was looking at him as if seeing him for the first time. "The weapon is jammed intentionally," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger as she addressed not just but the entire assembled unit. "Inside the chamber, you'll find a coin. Not just any coin, but one that represents a truth that has been classified for the past 18 months. The crowd pressed closer despite themselves. Felt's questioning gaze from across the formation, but he couldn't look away from Sarah's face. During their deployments, she had been the keeper of his shot count, the one who has kills for official records. Standard military protocol required spotters to maintain detailed logs of successful engagements, but had never asked to see his complete file. Like most snipers, he preferred not to dwell on the numbers. Each shot taken in combat carried weight beyond the technical challenge. Each confirmed kill represented a life ended, regardless of the tactical necessity or legal justification. Most soldiers in his position focused on the missions completed, and teammates protected rather than maintaining a personal tally. "What kind of coin?" asked, his voice barely audible over the desert wind. Sarah's expression softened slightly, the professional mask slipping to reveal something more personal. "The kind that tells a story about the most effective long-range marksman in Marine Corps history. The kind that represents a level of precision and consistency that military statisticians said was theoretically impossible." Felt the blood drain from his face. Throughout his career, he had taken pride in his accuracy and reliability, but he had never considered himself exceptional compared to other elite snipers. He completed his missions, protected his unit, and came home alive. That had always been enough. "During our deployments," Sarah continued, "you never missed a shot when it mattered, not once. Every engagement was confirmed, every target eliminated with single-shot precision under conditions that would challenge the best marksmen in the world." The rifle in his hands suddenly felt heavier. He thought about the countless hours of training, the patient stalking through hostile terrain, the split-second decisions made under life-and-death pressure. He remembered specific shots: the insurgent preparing to detonate an IED near a school, the enemy sniper who had pinned down a patrol for 6 hours, the numerous times when his accuracy had meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Broke from the formation and walked toward him, her face reflecting confusion and growing concern. She had supported him through multiple deployments, had waited through months of silence broken only by brief satellite phone calls, had nursed him through the nightmares and adjustment periods that followed each return home. But this moment was revealing something about her husband's service that she had never known. "How many?" asked quietly, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Sarah reached into her pocket and a small brass object. Even from several feet away, could see that it was a commemorative coin, the kind typically used to recognize extraordinary achievement or mark significant milestones. These coins were unofficial military tradition, passed between units and individuals as tokens of respect and accomplishment. "To find out," Sarah said, holding up the coin, "you'll need to clear that rifle." Hands moved with practiced efficiency as he began the process of clearing the jammed rifle. The assembled Marines watched in silence as their former colleague demonstrated the same methodical precision that had defined his career. Each movement was deliberate and controlled, muscle memory taking over despite the unusual circumstances. The MRAD's bolt was indeed stuck fast, but could feel that this was no accidental malfunction. Someone had carefully engineered this situation, creating a jam that would require complete disassembly to resolve. As he worked, memories flooded back from his various deployments, mission briefings, and the countless hours spent maintaining his equipment in forward operating bases across 2 war zones. Moved closer, studying her husband's face as he focused on the weapon. During his active duty years, she had learned to read his expressions, understanding the difference between routine cleaning and the intense concentration he displayed when something was seriously wrong. This expression was different, a mixture of professional focus and growing apprehension that she had never seen before. "The first time I spotted for you," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the formation, "was in Helmand Province. Taliban fighters had established a position in a village marketplace, using civilian cover to prevent airstrikes. Command needed them eliminated with surgical precision to avoid collateral damage." Paused in his disassembly, remembering that mission with crystalline clarity. It had been Sarah's first combat deployment, his third. The intelligence reports had indicated at least 6 hostile fighters positioned throughout a crowded market area, each armed with automatic weapons and explosives. The tactical situation had required multiple precision shots across different elevation angles and ranges, all within a compressed to prevent the remaining fighters from escaping or harming civilians. "Distance to target was 847 meters, Sarah continued, her voice taking on the clinical tone she had used during mission debriefs. "Wind conditions were variable, gusting from the southwest at 15 to 25 knots. Temperature differential between our position and target area created significant atmospheric distortion." The crowd of Marines leaned in closer as Sarah recounted the technical details. Long-range precision shooting was as much science as skill, requiring calculations that accounted for bullet trajectory, environmental conditions, target movement patterns, and a dozen other variables that could affect accuracy. Even experienced snipers missed shots under ideal conditions, and the scenario Sarah was describing represented some of the most challenging circumstances possible. Remembered the weight of that mission differently than Sarah was presenting it. To him, it had been another job requiring focus and execution under pressure. He had taken the shots because they needed to be taken, eliminating threats to protect both military personnel and civilian lives. The technical difficulty hadn't been his primary concern. Only the successful completion of the mission mattered. 6 targets, Sarah said, watching's reaction carefully. 6 different firing positions across a 200-meter area. Each shot had to be taken in sequence with minimal delay to prevent the remaining fighters from identifying our location and either escaping or returning fire. As continued working on the rifle disassembly, he could feel the tension building among the assembled crowd. Military ceremonies were typically predictable affairs with predetermined speeches and presentations. This impromptu revelation was creating an atmosphere of anticipation that made everyone present feel like witnesses to something significant. First shot, hostile fighter positioned behind market vendor stall, partially concealed by hanging fabric. Range 847 meters, target acquisition time 4 seconds, wind hold compensation 2.5 minutes left. Shot taken, target eliminated. Sarah's voice remained steady, but could detect subtle emotion beneath her professional delivery. He remembered that first shot vividly now. The target had been barely visible through his scope, just a glimpse of uniform and weapon barrel between swaying pieces of cloth. The wind conditions had been tricky, requiring him to compensate not just for velocity, but for the unpredictable gusting pattern that could push his bullet off target by several inches. Watched her husband's face as Sarah continued the recounting. She had heard general stories about his military service, but never these kinds of specific operational details. The clinical precision of Sarah's description painted a picture of combat that was far removed from the Hollywood depictions she had seen in movies. This was methodical, calculated work performed under life-and-death pressure. Second shot, target repositioning between two concrete barriers approximately 50 meters east of first position. Range 892 meters, elevated firing angle, target moving at walking pace from left to right. Compensation for target movement, lead time calculated at 0.7 seconds. Shot taken during target's brief pause behind partial cover. Target eliminated. Felt the first component of the rifle's action separate in his hands. The mechanical precision of the weapon's construction matched the precision required to use it effectively. Every part had been engineered to work in perfect harmony, just as every aspect of a successful sniper engagement required multiple elements to align correctly. Third and fourth shots, Sarah continued. Targets positioned in elevated firing positions approximately 30 meters apart, second-story windows overlooking Market Square. Simultaneous threat to both civilian population and our supporting ground units. Range to targets 823 and 831 meters respectively, different elevation angles requiring separate ballistic calculations. The crowd was completely silent now, absorbed in Sarah's methodical recounting of events that had occurred years earlier and thousands of miles away. Could sense the growing realization among his fellow Marines that they were hearing about something extraordinary, a level of precision and consistency that exceeded normal expectations even for elite military marksmen. Time interval between third and fourth shots was 7 seconds, Sarah said, her voice growing slightly hoarse from the emotion she was trying to suppress. Bolt operation, target acquisition, range and wind calculation, firing sequence. 7 seconds to eliminate 2 separate threats before they could engage our ground support element. Remembered the pressure of that moment more clearly than the technical details. The ground unit had been exposed in the market area, unable to take cover without abandoning the civilians they were trying to protect. The enemy fighters had been preparing to open fire from their elevated positions, and had known that any delay would result in casualties among both military personnel and innocent people. As more components of the rifle action came apart in his hands, could see something metallic lodged deep within the chamber area. The coin Sarah had mentioned was there, but accessing it would require complete disassembly of several more components. The process was taking longer than a normal cleaning procedure, giving Sarah time to continue her detailed recounting of that long-ago mission. Fifth target, fighter attempting to escape through rear entrance of market building, carrying what intelligence later confirmed was a suicide vest intended for use against civilian targets. Sarah paused, letting the implications of that detail settle among the listening Marines. Range 901 meters, target moving at running pace, partial concealment behind civilian vehicles and market debris. Shot taken during brief window when target was visible between cover positions. Target eliminated, explosive device safely recovered by ordnance disposal teams. Metallic object was becoming more visible as continued his methodical disassembly. What he could see of the coin appeared to be custom-made, with detailed engravings that caught the desert's sunlight. The weight of anticipation from the assembled crowd was becoming almost tangible, but found himself dreading the revelation more than welcoming it. Sixth target, Sarah continued, her voice now carrying unmistakable pride. The mission commander. Intelligence had identified him as a high-value target responsible for coordinating multiple attacks against coalition forces and civilian targets throughout the province. Remembered this shot differently than the others. The mission commander had been the primary objective, while the other fighters were considered secondary threats. Eliminating him would disrupt enemy operations across a wide area and potentially save dozens of lives in future attacks. The pressure to succeed on this particular shot had been immense. Target was positioned in a fortified observation post approximately 200 meters from the market area, elevated position with reinforced concrete barriers providing substantial cover. Only viable shot angle required precision placement through a gap in the fortification measuring approximately 8 inches wide. Felt her chest tighten as she listened to Sarah's description. The technical challenge being described sounded nearly impossible, even to someone with no military background. An 8-inch gap at nearly a kilometer distance, under combat conditions, with wind and atmospheric distortion affecting bullet trajectory. Range to target was 1,047 meters, Sarah said, pausing to let that distance register with the audience. Wind conditions had shifted, now gusting from multiple directions due to thermal effects from burning debris in the market area. Atmospheric distortion was severe due to temperature differential and smoke interference. Had reached the point in his disassembly where the coin would soon be accessible. His movements had slowed slightly, not from technical difficulty, but from reluctance to uncover whatever truth the coin represented. Throughout his career, he had preferred to focus on missions and objectives rather than personal statistics or recognition. The shot required compensation for multiple environmental factors occurring simultaneously, Sarah continued. Variable wind patterns, atmospheric distortion, target movement within limited exposure window, and elevation angle calculations that pushed the limits of the rifle's effective range. Colonel stepped forward, addressing the assembled crowd directly. What Gunnery Sergeant is describing represents one of the most challenging sniper engagements on record in Marine Corps history. 6 targets, 6 shots, mission completion time under 3 minutes, 0 misses, 0 collateral damage. Looked up from his work, meeting the colonel's gaze. During his career, he had completed hundreds of missions without thinking of them in terms of historical significance or record-setting performance. Each engagement had been approached as a job requiring professional execution, nothing more. But that mission, the colonel continued, was not unique in Sergeant's service record, it was representative. The word representative hung in the air like a challenge, felt questioning stare intensifying as the implications became clear. If the Helmand Province engagement was typical rather than exceptional, it suggested a level of consistency that bordered on the impossible. Sarah reached into her pocket and a thick folder that had never seen before. Command authorized me to compile a complete record of your confirmed kills across all deployments. Every shot by multiple sources, every engagement documented with full tactical details. His hands stopped moving as he stared at the folder. Standard military procedure required basic record-keeping for all combat engagements, but the document Sarah was holding appeared far more comprehensive than typical operational reports. The folder contains detailed analysis of 87 separate engagements across 7 different operational areas, Sarah said quietly. Every single shot confirmed as a successful target elimination. 0 misses under combat conditions spanning 4 years of active deployment. The number hit like a physical blow. 87 confirmed kills represented a level of combat effectiveness that few snipers achieved in entire careers. More troubling was Sarah's claim of 0 misses under combat conditions, a statistic that seemed mathematically impossible given the variables involved in precision shooting. "That can't be right," said, his voice barely audible. "Nobody has that kind of consistency. Combat conditions, equipment variables, environmental factors, there are too many things that can go wrong." Moved closer to her husband, placing her hand on his shoulder as she studied his face. She could see genuine distress in his expression, the reaction of someone confronting information that challenged his understanding of his own experiences. "The statistical analysis was conducted by military mathematicians," Colonel interjected. "They ran probability calculations based on standard combat variables, environmental conditions, and equipment reliability factors. According to their analysis, the likelihood of achieving 87 consecutive confirmed kills without a single miss is approximately 1 in 847 million. Resumed his disassembly work, his movements now urgent rather than methodical. He needed to see the coin to understand what message or symbol someone had chosen to represent this revelation about his service record. Range distances for confirmed kills varied from 387 meters to 1,340 meters. Sarah continued reading from the folder. Environmental conditions included desert heat distortion, mountain altitude effects, urban atmospheric interference, nighttime temperature inversions, and direct combat engagement under enemy fire. The final component blocking access to the coin separated in his hands. The small brass object tumbled free from the rifle's chamber, landing in his palm with surprising weight. As he turned the coin over to examine both sides, his breath caught in his throat. One side of the coin bore the Marine Corps eagle, globe, and anchor emblem, surrounded by text reading "Precision under fire." The reverse side contained two numbers that made his hands tremble slightly. 870. Below the numbers was a single line of text that changed everything he thought he knew about his military service. Most lethal marksman in Marine Corps history. Read the coin over her husband's shoulder, her grip on his arm tightening as the full implications became clear. The man she had married, the father of her children, the quiet veteran who preferred not to discuss his wartime service in detail, had apparently achieved something that military statisticians considered nearly impossible. The classification period for your complete service record expired last month, Colonel announced. Marine Corps Command authorized this ceremony to officially recognize achievements that were previously considered sensitive information. Stared at the coin, struggling to reconcile the official recognition with his personal memories of military service. He had never considered himself exceptional compared to other elite snipers, had never sought recognition beyond successful mission completion and safe return of his unit. "There's something else," Sarah said softly, opening the folder to reveal additional documents. "The 87 confirmed kills represent only your solo engagements. Multi-target operations where multiple snipers engaged simultaneously aren't included in the official count." Felt the world shift around him as Sarah's words sank in. The number 87 had seemed impossible enough, but the implication that additional engagements existed beyond the official count made the situation even more surreal. He looked at the coin again, its weight suddenly feeling disproportionate to its size. "How many total?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Sarah exchanged glances with Colonel before responding. "Including multi-sniper operations where your shots were confirmed separate from team totals, the number approaches 120. But military protocol only recognizes solo engagements for individual records." Stepped back slightly, studying her husband's face as if seeing him for the first time. During their marriage, she had known him as a dedicated Marine who took his duties seriously, but this revelation painted a picture of capabilities she had never imagined. The quiet man who helped their daughter with homework and coached Little League baseball had apparently been one of the most lethal soldiers in American military history. "The reason for the classification period," Colonel explained, "was operational security. Your effectiveness had become known to enemy intelligence networks. Several attempts were made to specifically target you during your final deployment." Remembered increased security protocols during his last months in Afghanistan, additional restrictions on his movements, and changes to mission planning that he had attributed to general threat level increases. The idea that enemy forces had been specifically hunting him added a personal dimension to the danger that he had never fully understood. Counterintelligence intercepted communications indicating that insurgent groups had placed a bounty specifically on the American Ghost Sniper, operating in your area of operations, Sarah continued. The bounty amount was substantial enough to attract foreign fighters and professional assassins. The assembled Marines shifted uncomfortably as they processed this information. Most military personnel faced general threats from enemy forces, but the concept of being specifically targeted by name represented a different level of danger entirely. Began reassembling the rifle, his hands moving automatically through the familiar process while his mind struggled with the revelations. Each component clicked into place with mechanical precision, the same reliability that had characterized his shooting throughout multiple deployments. "There were 3 confirmed attempts on your life during the final 6 months of deployment," Sarah said quietly. 2 involved enemy snipers specifically positioned to countersnipe your known operating areas. The 3rd was a coordinated assault on your forward operating base, timed to coincide with your scheduled return from a mission. Felt her knees weaken as she realized how close she had come to losing her husband without ever knowing the specific nature of the threats he faced. During his deployments, she had worried about general combat dangers, but learning about targeted assassination attempts made the risks feel more personal and immediate. The enemy snipers sent to eliminate you, Colonel added, were foreign professionals, not local insurgents. Intelligence indicated they were experienced marksmen recruited specifically for missions against high-value American targets. Looked up from the rifle reassembly. What happened to them? Sarah's expression hardened slightly. Both enemy snipers were eliminated during their attempts to engage you. Counter-sniper operations, ranges of 1,200 and 1,450 meters respectively. Neither engagement is included in your official 87 count because they were classified as defensive actions rather than offensive target elimination. The mechanical precision required for counter-sniper work exceeded even the challenges of normal long-range shooting. Enemy snipers were trained professionals who understood concealment, range calculation, and tactical positioning. Engaging and eliminating such opponents required not just accuracy, but tactical superiority and psychological resilience under extreme pressure. The third attempt, Sarah continued, involved a coordinated assault by approximately 30 fighters targeting your base specifically during your expected return window. Intelligence later confirmed that the timing was based on surveillance of your mission patterns and communication intercepts. Had completed the rifle reassembly, the weapon now functioning normally in his hands. The mechanical process had provided a familiar anchor while processing information that challenged everything he thought he understood about his military service. Command decided to extract you early and implement the classification protocols, Colonel explained. Your effectiveness had made you too valuable to risk, but also too recognizable to enemy forces to continue normal operations. Realized that her husband's early return from his final deployment, which she had attributed to routine rotation schedules, had actually been an emergency extraction designed to protect him from specific threats. The relief she had felt at his safe return took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of targeted assassination attempts. The statistical analysis conducted by military mathematicians, Sarah said, consulting her folder again, concluded that your level of consistency approached the theoretical limits of human performance under combat conditions. They recommended studying your methods and training approaches for implementation in advanced sniper instruction. Felt overwhelmed by the implications of being treated as a subject for scientific study. Throughout his career, he had simply done his job to the best of his ability, focusing on mission success and unit safety rather than personal achievement or record-setting performance. Your training methods, equipment modifications, and tactical approaches have been incorporated into the updated Marine Corps sniper training curriculum, Colonel announced. Future generations of Marine marksmen will benefit from techniques you developed through practical application under combat conditions. The idea that his personal adaptations and innovations would influence military training for years to come added another layer of significance to revelations that was already struggling to process. He had made equipment modifications and developed tactical approaches based on field experience and practical necessity, not with the intention of advancing military science. There's one more thing, Sarah said, reaching into the folder for a final document. Marine Corps Command has recommended you for the Distinguished Service Cross for your overall combat effectiveness and the specific engagement that prevented the coordinated assault on your forward operating base. Stared at Sarah in disbelief. The Distinguished Service Cross was the second highest military decoration for valor, typically reserved for extraordinary heroism under combat conditions. Learning that his service had warranted such recognition felt surreal, particularly since he had never considered his actions exceptional compared to the dedication shown by other Marines in his units. The recommendation was submitted 18 months ago, but held pending the declassification of your service record, Colonel explained. Processing should be completed within the next few weeks. Moved closer to her husband, taking his hand as she studied the coin that had started this entire revelation. The man she had married was apparently not just a dedicated soldier, but someone whose contributions to military effectiveness would be remembered and studied for decades to come. Looked around at the assembled crowd of Marines, many of whom were now viewing him with expressions of awe and respect that made him deeply uncomfortable. Throughout his career, he had preferred to blend in with his unit rather than stand out as exceptional or different. The weight of the coin in his palm felt heavier than any piece of metal should. As he stood in the desert wind, surrounded by Marines who were looking at him with newfound respect and curiosity, he struggled to reconcile the official recognition with his personal memories of military service that he had always considered simply doing his duty. Squeezed his hand, anchoring him to the present moment as his mind raced through implications he was still processing. Their teenage daughter, Maria, stepped forward from where she had been standing with other family members. She had grown up knowing her father was a Marine, but the technical details Sarah had shared painted a picture of capabilities that seemed almost fictional. "Dad," Maria said quietly, "is all of this really true?" Looked down at his daughter, seeing confusion and curiosity in her expression. Throughout her childhood, she had asked occasional questions about his military service, but he had always provided general answers focused on teamwork, duty, and service rather than specific operational details. "Yes," he said simply, "but it's not the whole story." Sarah closed the folder containing his service records, but kept it in her hands as she addressed the assembled crowd. "The numbers and statistics represent measurable achievement, but they don't capture the full picture of Sergeant's service. Every shot taken was in defense of American lives or protection of civilian populations. Every mission completed contributed to operational success that extended far beyond individual engagements." Colonel stepped forward to address the gathered Marines directly. "The reason we've shared this information today is not to glorify individual achievement, but to recognize the standard of excellence that Sergeant represented throughout his career. His approach to training, preparation, and mission execution exemplifies the dedication that Marine Corps leadership expects from all personnel." Appreciated the Colonel's attempt to frame the recognition in terms of professional standards rather than personal glory, but he still felt uncomfortable being singled out among Marines who had shown equal dedication under different circumstances. "The techniques and innovations developed by Sergeant during his deployments," Colonel continued, "have been integrated into updated training programs that will improve the effectiveness of future Marine marksmen. His contributions extend beyond his individual service record to influence military capabilities for years to come." Studied the faces of the assembled Marines as they processed this information. She could see expressions of genuine respect and professional interest, but also recognition that they were witnessing something historically significant. Her husband's military achievements would apparently be studied and emulated by future generations of soldiers. "The classification period for these records," Sarah explained, "was implemented primarily for operational security, but also to protect Sergeant and his family from unwanted attention or potential threats from hostile intelligence networks. Had never considered the possibility that his military service could create ongoing security concerns for his family after retirement. The idea that enemy organizations might maintain interest in targeting him years after leaving active duty added a sobering dimension to the recognition he was receiving. "Current threat assessments," Colonel said, "indicate minimal ongoing risk, but certain security protocols will remain in place indefinitely. Marine Corps intelligence will maintain periodic contact to ensure your family's safety and provide updates on any relevant threat developments." Maria moved closer to her father, processing the implication that their family might face ongoing security considerations because of his military service. The teenage understanding of her father as a Marine was being replaced by recognition of capabilities and achievements that seemed almost legendary. "The coin you're holding," Sarah said, "is one of only 12 that will ever be created. Marine Corps Command commissioned them specifically to recognize achievement levels that exceed normal performance parameters. The other 11 will be distributed to museums, training facilities, and historical archives." Examined the coin again, noting details in the engraving that he had missed during his initial shock at discovering it. The craftsmanship was exceptional, with precise detail work that reflected the same attention to accuracy that had characterized his shooting throughout multiple deployments. Realized that the coin represented not just recognition of her husband's achievements, but a piece of military history that would be preserved and displayed for future generations. The physical object in his hands connected his personal service to broader historical records of military excellence. "Your service record," Colonel announced, "will be included in the Marine Corps Historical Center archives, with appropriate security classifications to protect sensitive operational details while preserving the factual achievements for historical research. The idea of his military experiences becoming part of official historical records felt surreal too, who had always viewed his service in terms of immediate tactical objectives rather than long-term historical significance. Learning that military historians would study and analyze his methods added scholarly weight to experiences he remembered primarily in terms of personal challenge and unit responsibility. The Distinguished Service Cross ceremony, Sarah added, will be scheduled once final processing is completed. Marine Corps leadership intends to use the presentation as an opportunity to recognize not just your individual achievement, but the dedication and sacrifice of all Marines who have served with distinction in combat operations. Nodded slowly, understanding that the award ceremony would represent closure to his military career while honoring the broader community of Marines who had served alongside him. The recognition felt more appropriate when framed in terms of collective service rather than individual accomplishment. As the formal ceremony concluded and the assembled Marines began to disperse, walked toward their car. The coin remained in his hand, its physical presence serving as tangible proof of revelations that still felt partially unreal. "How do you feel about all this?" asked as they reached their vehicle. Was quiet for several moments, watching their daughter say goodbye to Marine families they had known for years. The retirement ceremony had been intended to mark the transition from military to civilian life, but the revelations about his service record had complicated that transition in ways he was still processing. "Proud," he said finally, "but also overwhelmed. I never saw myself as exceptional compared to other Marines. Everyone I served with showed the same dedication and commitment to mission success." Understood that her husband's humility and focus on team achievement rather than individual recognition had been central to his character throughout their marriage. Learning about his extraordinary military accomplishments hadn't changed her perception of him as a person, but it had added context to the quiet confidence and methodical approach he brought to all aspects of his life. "The numbers are impressive," continued, "but what matters most is that everyone in my units came home safely. That was always the real measure of success." As they drove away from the ceremony, kept the coin in his hand, feeling its weight and texture. The small brass object represented recognition of achievements that would apparently influence military training and historical records for decades to come. But it also symbolized the successful completion of duties he had approached with professionalism rather than ambition. The jammed rifle that had started the day's revelations was now functioning perfectly, just as had transitioned from active duty to retirement with the same mechanical precision that had characterized his military service. The coin would serve as a permanent reminder of capabilities he had developed through dedication and experience, but more importantly, it represented the successful protection of the Marines who had served alongside him across multiple deployments. In the years that followed, would occasionally take out the coin and remember not the statistics or records, but the faces of the Marines whose lives had been protected by his precision under fire. The number 87 would remain significant not as a personal achievement, but as a measure of duties fulfilled and responsibilities met during the most challenging circumstances imaginable.